My mic is hot. Oh, thank you guys. All right, just checking. How's the sound out on that side? My mic was live. Sorry about that. I had an interesting day today. We had to basically, we had to reinstall the operating system. It was time to upgrade. And looking at my schedule, I wasn't going to have any time to do it anytime soon. So we went ahead and took care of that this morning, and that took pretty much all day. So I'm now on macOS Catalina, and as a result of that, there were some things that didn't get saved. The eCam profile was one of them. So we think we've got that sorted out now. Let's switch over here to our agenda for today. So we've got a number of things to cover. First of all, just a little public service announcement. I was just on the phone with my sister, who still lives in California. I grew up there. And she told me that they have to start wearing masks if they go out in public. And so I got my masks ready here. We got a few different options. What this comes from is I have a friend, actually, and also a client. Oh, it's fogging up the glasses. His family owns a costume company. They actually make mascot costumes. And nobody's buying mascot costumes right now, so they have pivoted and they are now making masks. Thought that was clever. I hope that works well for them. So here are some of your options there, and then of course we have the more conservative option, if you prefer. But anyway, he was kind enough to send some of these over. I am hopeful that they survive okay through this. They're a pretty good company. What they do is they make mascot costumes. So a lot of the professional teams out there. In fact, this is my friend right here. This is Chris. That's his son, I think. But they have started making these masks. Now, obviously, these are not N95 masks. We're not competing, he's not competing here with, hospitals and first responders. This is just for the, when you go out, just to remind you not to touch your face and to practice social distancing as a lot of these states are getting ready to open up, if you will. So if you are interested, Olinko Costumes is the name of the place, so you can get some of those over there. So there was first our public service announcement. Let's take another look here at the agenda. We've got a lot to cover today. So today's microphone is the Lewitt Lct 440 Pure. This is a large diaphragm condenser microphone. It is in the kind of the same, price range as the Rode NT1, so it's less than $300. It's $250 or so, somewhere around there. And we're just testing this out. So I'm getting ready to do an episode coming up here soon on large diaphragm condenser microphones for voiceover. And so this is one we're testing out. These guys were kind enough to contact me and send this over. So pretty excited to give it a try here. I'm wondering, what do you guys think of the sound here so far? Sounding okay? We'll see. All right. Next up, for those who are not aware, Sound Devices is hosting something that's pretty interesting. Namely, we don't need picture-in-picture for both of me there. They've put together in lieu of NAB show. They have put together a little sound conference. It's going to last 2 days, and they've invited a bunch of other manufacturers. And so let me just pull up here the info they have on that. So if you hadn't heard about it, so it's the 30th and the 1st, so the 30th of April and the 1st of May. And if you're interested in signing up, you just go over to the Sound Devices website, and I put this in the description as well. So you can just do a search for Sound Summit if you're not sure where to find it. But there are a variety of different companies that'll be coming. It'll be all of those companies you see there: Sonosax, Viviana Straps, Electrosonics, K-Tech, DPA, Ursa Straps, VDB, Bubblebee, Sound Devices, Audio Limited. So, and others may join as well. They actually originally had scheduled it earlier, but then they moved it as they got more vendors interested in signing up. So this looks to be a pretty interesting thing. So if you've got some time available, go ahead and you wanted to join over at the Sound Devices website is where you can find that. So, all right, let's see here. Let's get us queued up here and look at the rest of our agenda here. Okay. I need to move that. That's really awkward. So sorry about that. We're also going to we'll take a look at the NVIDIA RTX Voice. So actually, let's go ahead and talk about that now. If you haven't heard of this, so what this is that NVIDIA is a company that makes graphics cards. And of course, a lot of gamers use these cards. They've become incredibly powerful over the last, more than a decade. They've been in business for a couple of decades at least, I think. But their cards have really, they've added all this processing power to them to do all of the a lot of the graphics processing, obviously, and the shading and things of that nature. And so they have become extraordinarily powerful. And they've, as gamers have pushed and games have pushed the limits, their cards have also pushed the limits and enabled things that are pretty impressive. So one thing they did that was very interesting recently is they have released for their newer RTX cards. And actually, you can get it to run on their non-RTX cards, although it's not quite as efficient. But it's a real-time noise reduction that's actually processed through their video cards. So there are several demonstrations out there if you wanted to check them out and hear exactly what it sounds like. I can't demo it here because I don't have a PC, so it's going to exclude the Mac guys for the most part. But in any case, it looks like really interesting technology, and I was astonished at how well it worked in the various samples that I saw out there. So is it perfect? No. Is it, and actually, to be honest, I'm more interested in it from a post-production standpoint where you could actually process audio that's already been recorded through this noise reduction and kind of tweak it and kind of tune it in until you get it to just where you want it. The interesting thing is that it's basically one control. You can either turn it on or off, and then you have a slider to basically say how aggressive you want it to be. And of course, when you crank it all the way, you can definitely hear some artifacts. And when you start doing crazy, crazy stuff, you can hear artifacts as well. But it is probably one of the better noise reduction algorithms I've ever heard. They claim it's artificial intelligence and that it's been run through various learning models, or they fed various noise sources through learning models. And what I found is it does an extraordinary job of isolating the dialogue from all of the other stuff. So, all right. Next up, the Deity D4 the D4 Duo and the BP TRX. Let's talk about those for just a minute here. These look pretty interesting as well. So Deity made some new announcements this week. One is a camera top shotgun microphone, but what's unique about it, and who knows, you might laugh at these things, but they might actually come in handy someday. It's a forward-facing capsule and a back-facing capsule, and the idea is that the person operating the camera can now participate. So if you're doing some sort of vlog type thing, interview, whatever, you can actually turn that rear capsule on or off. It also has a 3.5 millimeter input, so you can do a lot of really interesting things with it. And let's actually just pull that up here real quickly, just so you can see what that looks like. Here we go. Okay. So there's the D4 Duo, and again, you can see there's a mic on the front and a mic on the back. So the idea is you can, as they say, tell the whole story. You can put a dead cat type cover on it, this auxiliary 3.5 millimeter input, and then it just runs right into camera, or a 3.5 millimeter input on a recorder. So that looked kind of interesting. The other thing that they announced, which I'm actually, to be honest, a lot more excited about, is the BP TRX. And let's just pull that up here. So this is kind of a Swiss Army knife kind of thing, and it looks super interesting. You can transmit, record, or receive. So it can be a receiver, it can be a transmitter, or it can be a recorder. and it's part of their Connect system. So it's stereo, as I understand it. So it's 2 channels, and has a lot of the other features we've come to expect, or that we've seen in the previous releases within the Deity Connect wireless system. So that looks pretty interesting as well. It's got an analog limiter. They have been pretty aggressive about putting firmware updates out there. The one thing that I saw in the original review when I did it with the very first firmware was that there was a fair bit of self noise in the system, and so I was kind of like, it's really innovative, it's cool, yay. Inbuilt batteries that are not technically according to Andrew, they can be user replaced. You have to order one from them, and they can send you a new battery, and you can take a couple screws out and replace it, but it's not like AA batteries. So that was another thing that some people were really iffy on, and for me, it's like, But otherwise, a great system. A lot of interesting features that they put on it. But now they have this new kind of all-purpose thing. This could be used to do camera hops now. And based on the way Deity prices their products, this would be one of the more affordable ways to do a wireless camera hop in a dedicated sort of fashion. So pretty exciting thing coming along here. So it does record in 24-bit 48 kilohertz WAV files. It's also a timecode generator. Bonus. So it can do all those different things depending on what you need it to, what purpose you need it to fill for that particular shoot that you're working on. So that looks pretty interesting. All right. Let's head on back over here. All right, I think what we're going to do now is going to jump into our question and answer session. So let's see what we got on the agenda for today. And we'll come back here. We've got a couple other things. We'll do the question and answer. We'll come back to the Deity Connect gain structure item a little bit later. So Rod asks, I will be doing soundscape recording with my Zoom F4 and an Audio-Technica BP4025 stereo microphone. This is my first time. Will I need to pan each channel all the way left for the left channel and right all the way to the right channel, or center them both? That is a fine question. Actually, Rod, you don't have to do that. What you do need to do instead is you need to link the 2 channels. So for example, here on the Zoom F4, if I come into the track 1 pre-fader listen menu, I'll scroll down here to stereo link, and I want to go ahead and turn that on. We'll come back out. Now in terms of mode, you're going to want stereo link. You could also choose mid-side, but I don't believe yet that particular microphone is a mid-side microphone. I think it's just a stereo microphone. So you'll choose stereo link, and you'll notice that when we come out, we'll come back out. Now you'll notice that channel 2 is also armed, and if we come into its pre-fader listen, the stereo link is on. So that's how you're going to want to get things set up for doing a stereo recording with the Audio-Technica BP, which one is it? 4025. So hopefully that is helpful for you, Rod, and I hope you have a lot of fun with your stereo recordings. That'll be really cool. All right, let's take a look now. Nolan asks, I've been seeing a lot of secondhand sales for Sound Devices 522. Compared to what's out there right now, would this mixer recorder be a decent option? So the Sound Devices 522 is one of their older ones. I believe it has 5 analog inputs, if I'm not mistaken. But it is a 2-track recorder, so it's only a stereo recorder. You're not going to get your isolated channels. And in terms of outputs, I think it's only got 2 outputs, so you could do isolated recordings if you have just 2 channels and pan one hard right, one hard left. But I think that's going to be the biggest limitation. So I guess the answer, Nolan, is it depends on which jobs you're doing. If that fits your workflow, if you're generally only going to be recording 2, or you only need to record a stereo mix, then I think that'll be fine. But if you do need to get isolated channels for whatever you're doing, that's going to be the big limitation. And if anyone knows more about that particular one, I've never used that one. I've never actually laid my hands on it. I'm not entirely sure how many outputs it has, but I think it has 2. It maybe has 4, and I'm not sure how flexible the routing is on that. But in any case, I think that's the kind of thing you're going to want to look into a little bit more carefully, just to see if it fits your particular needs. So that's the main thing. Otherwise, the preamplifiers on Sound Devices, recorders, and mixers have always been very good. Is it going to be in the same league as the newest ones? I don't know about that, but I think you'll still get some good results out of them. So, all right, let's keep on moving here. We got a lot going. Rob K asks, I'd like to know what the difference between normalizing an audio clip to -X LUFS, loudness units full scale, and boosting an audio clip to by +X decibels. What's the difference is what he's asking there. So you can actually boost to meet an LUFS target, Rob. So they're not actually the same thing. So loudness units full scale, when you're talking about a loudness target, usually we have a variety of targets. So -16 LUFS stereo for online content, -23 LUFS for the European Broadcast Union. That's their loudness target. -24 for the United States. There are others as well. So those are really just targets, and they're measuring loudness in a way that is similar to the way that we hear. Now, when you boost or normalize a signal by X decibels, or normalize to a peak of a certain decibel target, you're not taking into account perceptual loudness or the way that humans hear. You're taking into account the waveform and the amplitude of the waveform. So without getting too complex here, I think really, I don't want to make this too obscure or difficult to follow, but basically you can boost by X number of decibels to hit an LUFS target. So usually, for example, when I bring my recordings into my digital audio workstation, a lot of times when I do the initial measurement, it's sitting somewhere around -30 LUFS mono. And so usually what I'll do is I'll boost that up to after I do the processing, the sweetening, things of that nature, whatever I need to do for it. Then I will boost it up to -20 or -19 LUFS, depending on the program, -19 typically for web. Then I will convert it to dual mono. That essentially makes it stereo because it'll have a left and a right channel. And -19 LUFS mono is the same as -16 LUFS stereo. So in that process, when I go from -30 to -19, I boost it by 11 dB to get there. And what I might have to do is I might have to do some compression or some limiting first to pull down some of the peaks so that I have enough headroom to get to that -19 LUFS target. So hopefully that makes sense. I know it's a little bit, it can be a little bit difficult to follow, but hopefully that kind of clarifies things a little bit. Incidentally, in terms of the scale, 1 dB, if you bump something up by 1 dB, then you should get a corresponding 1 LUFS increase in loudness as well, typically. All right. That is a good question, Rob. Thank you so much for asking that. All right, next up, our Dr. Friedman asks, can you make recommendations for sound on video conferences? We use a Zoom for 30 support meetings we have held in the last 5 weeks as part of a volunteer effort to support the supporters and people with disabilities. We've had 1,200 participants. What microphones are best to use? We're using Logitech webcams 922 and 930 models, and also Blue Yeti USB and Rode USB microphones. They all work fairly well. The freestanding USB mics have slightly more bass and presence, but the webcams will work well too. I think any of those will work well if the people are close enough to them. I think that's the biggest thing. But what I would say as far as improving the sound on video conferences, to me, the number one thing to do is for everyone to wear earbuds or headphones instead of playing the audio out for the conference on their computer speakers or laptop speakers or phone speakers. And the reason for that, that's where you start getting a lot of really crazy artifacting and the kind of high frequency ringing that you get a lot of times on conference calls. If everyone will wear headphones along with their microphone, that will make a huge, huge difference. So I would stick with the USB microphones you're using currently and just encourage people to listen back on their headphones as opposed to just letting it play out of their computer speakers. That'll do a ton to help those conference call audio situations. So hopefully that helps. All right, next up from Brad R. This question stems from your January 12th, 2020 boom mic video, as well as Gerald Undun's at the similar time. So just for those that aren't familiar with that, in January we did a kind of all the boom, it's like a meta review, I guess, of all the boom microphones that I've used. So that's what he's referring to. My business includes a lot of filming interviews and testimonials. I currently use a Deity that I'm very happy with, especially for women and men with mid-range voices because of the warmth it adds. My only complaint, as you and or Gerald also pointed out, is how it handles men with deep voices. You both gave the Octava MK012 good reviews for deep men's voices. However, in your buying advice section, you say that upgrading or buying multiple mics within the same price range isn't usually worth it for the payoff. But I'm wondering if you think it would be in this instance, since it's a primary function of my business, or do you think that it isn't necessary or worth owning multiple mics for varying uses? Brad, that's a great question. The warning that I was trying to give people was that, especially for YouTube creators, it seems like a lot of times they will go and they'll buy a piece of gear and then they'll buy another piece of gear that's $50 or $100 more, hoping that it will make a world of difference in terms of quality. And oftentimes it won't. And so that's all I was really warning against is don't do this little game with yourself where you upgrade by $50 to $100 each time and keep working your way up the ladder. And I think that can be an okay thing to do if you've got the free cash to do that. But if you really want to see a difference in terms of quality, which is different than what you're asking here, you're actually asking to tailor a microphone to different types of voices, which is completely different. And we'll come back to that. But if you just keep upgrading by $50 or $100, you may or may not see a huge difference in quality. That's what all I was talking about there. In your case, you're trying to get a different type of microphone for a different type of voice, and I think that's a perfectly legitimate thing to do. The Octava actually does add quite a bit of warmth to voices. So, it's good for most voices, but if you get it in really close, there's quite a bit of proximity effect, and it's a great sound for certain voices. But I think that in your case, it's a perfectly legitimate option, and I do think it's fine for you to buy another mic in the same price range. If you're getting good results with the one you have now, you just want something that is maybe voiced a little bit differently, so you have different options. Then yeah, I think that's a great choice. Just be aware that the Octava does have plenty of presence, a kind of low-end proximity effect if you get in too close to it. So I'm not sure that I would necessarily... Did I say that it was really good for deep men's voices? By deep meaning bassy? I don't remember saying that, but maybe I did. Who knows? That was way back in January. But yeah, I think having a variety of different microphones that are voiced differently is very useful, especially since you're running a business there and you're trying to tailor it to different types of voices. So I guess if I were to choose, I think that, I don't know which Deity you're using exactly, but the Octava definitely has a different sound. So I think that they would actually probably complement each other quite nicely. So, all right. Next up from Luke, I have a Sound Devices MixPre 6.2 and had in a recent project the need for an extra microphone. I have a wireless Sennheiser G3 ENG set with a MKE2 Gold mic. So it's a 3.5 millimeter TRS jack mic. Since there was no need to use a wireless, can I connect the MKE2 direct to the MixPre 6.2? And what are the configuration settings? No phantom power or aux-in. No phantom power on aux-in. Any alternative? Yes, we can show you how to set it up for your MixPre and to use it on the aux-in. So here we have our MixPre. Let's get this powered up. I don't have a lavalier here, but we'll just show you the settings that you would use. Okay, so first of all, the auxiliary input here is a multifunction jack. So it can be for a microphone input, it can be an output, on the MixPre 6.2 at least, it can be an output for timecode, it can be an input for timecode. So it serves a variety of different purposes. So first we have to tell the MixPre how we're going to use it. And the way we do that is, first of all, we come into, let's see here, I think we come to inputs. And first we have to choose the auxiliary input mode. And you want to make sure that's chosen, set to mic. And then once we've done that, what you can do is, let's say, for example, you wanted to put that on channel number 3. Now, here's the thing, on the MixPre 3, let me just take a look here. You're on a MixPre 6. But on the MixPre 3, you have to share it. I think on the MixPre 6, you have to go into the menu, and you can actually put it on channels 5 and 6. So you can come into this menu and choose channel 5, and that's where you would put it. But on the MixPre 3, I had to put it here. So I'm going to put it here. I'm going to press here, come to the second page, and I'm going to choose where I'm going to get this input for track number 3. And I just choose aux in 1. Once I've done that, I can come back out here and let's see here. Here we go. I can set the gain here. Now you can see the gain level is actually a little different with the auxiliary input. It's from 10 dB to 40 dB. I think a lot of lavalier microphones are going to need close to that 40 dB. And also that 3.5 millimeter input, when you change it to microphone in, it does supply plug-in power. So that'll be enough to supply the power that your MKE2 microphone needs. So that is how you should be able to set that up and get yourself up and running. So that's how you could feed that in. Hopefully that helps, Luke. All right, next from George. I use Tentacle Syncs for audio syncing single and multicam setups with my MixPre 3. I was looking at the Rodecaster Pro for a more versatile audio platform for doing podcast-style pieces with more speakers. Is there any way to get timecode from a Tentacle Sync into the Rodecaster Pro recording for syncing to multicam setups in post? Well, I don't see an easy way to do that. And the problem I'm seeing is, so you could feed timecode into one of the XLR microphone inputs, but the problem is that you would then want to mute that channel in your monitors. And as I remember, I don't think there's a way to do that, although I haven't tested the beta firmware yet. But I think in general terms, it's not exactly the best device for that purpose. So it'd be a little bit of a stretch. Let me double check the routing, but I don't think there's a way to do that, George. I apologize. In the next couple of weeks here, we'll actually do a video looking at the new beta firmware on the Rodecaster Pro on my main channel, Curtis Judd Audio. And so check back in over there and we should have a better idea then. But my sense is, from what I remember right now, there's no way you would be listening to timecode and it would drive you crazy. As long as you're monitoring the whole thing, the whole recording, you would be hearing that timecode and it would drive you absolutely batty. Okay. All right. And then also, Lloyd just added something here in regards to the last question. For the MixPre 6, aux-in can be patched to any fader, 1 to 4 being best so you can control the level, but if those are already being used, you can also use 5 to 6, which doesn't have its own dedicated control physical fader, but you can actually control that through the menu. So you've got a couple options there. Thanks for that, Lloyd. That's a great point there. Okay. Next up from Alex, I am just amazed how Deity is innovating nonstop and making disruptive moves. They just announced the D4 Pro with the ability to add lav or remote unit. Amazing. They really address the needs, though it is less relevant for my use case, but still amazing. They also released the new BPTRX unit. Amazing. Please review it ASAP. I need to understand if it's any good for my use cases. I promise you, Alex, I will review it as soon as I can, as soon as we get our hands on that. And probably I don't know if they'll send me the D4 Duo or not. I'll have to buy that on my own, but definitely the BPTRX I will be reviewing, so I can definitely talk about that one. All right, next from Gary. Could I ask a few questions about the Zoom F6, which I've just purchased? I'm also a blind person working as a journalist, so heavily reliant on the iOS app to manipulate the settings and menus, as Apple has a built-in screen reader in iOS called VoiceOver. So first question, in 32-bit float mode, I can still change the trim settings on each channel from the app. I thought you had mentioned they were disabled when in 32-bit float. Okay, let's come in here, and in fact, I don't know if I'll be able to do this. Let's see if I can do this here. I'm going to try and show it here. So to enable the Bluetooth, again, you have to have the little add-on BTA1 or something, I think it's called. And then you can connect it to your iOS device. Let's see if I've got it here. Sorry, my screen is really gross right now. I just realized. All right. And I don't currently, let's actually connect a microphone here just to keep things sane. longer exceeding the max input level. There we go. Okay. All right, so on the app, if I arm channel 1 and come into its menu here, actually first let's confirm that we're in 32-bit float mode. I guess we're going to have to do that from the app. Come into the menu, rec mode. Okay, we are in 32-bit float mode, you can see there. It's just needed to confirm that. Okay, we come back out here. We come in here to the channel menu, and look at this. The trim can evidently be set, but what's interesting is that as I change that trim, watch the meters here. Okay, that was at 12 dB, now we're at 75 dB, and the meters are about the same. So what I'm reading from that is that you are not setting the trim. This is just an artifact or a weird behavior, maybe a bug in the app. So you're not actually changing the trim. You are just, the app does that funny thing. So when you are in 32-bit float mode, the trim setting here in the app has no effect on the overall amplification applied to the microphone input. So that was a good question and a good catch. Number 2, the channel knobs, as I understand it, only ever change the fader level. Is that right? And therefore, if you set the machine not to record a left-right track, just solo tracks for each channel, what effect does turning the encoders on each channel have? Let's come back to that. That's a good question. So, whoops. All right, so we don't actually, oh, here we go to the mixer. Okay, so now we're on the mixer here. And actually the same applies when you're working with the device itself. The faders are unusual on the Zoom F6. They are technically when you're recording in 32-bit float mode, when you adjust this fader, that's actually adjusting the individual channel. And what's getting recorded is whatever changes you make on this, that level is actually getting recorded to the recorder when you're recording. So it doesn't act just like a traditional fader. And in fact, yeah, it's actually fairly unusual as far as audio gear goes. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Now, there's also another mode. And let's go back to the main here. And I don't know if I can do it here. I might have to pop out. I think it's in the input menu. Yes, it's in the input menu, which I don't have here. So if I come in here, no, I just have the output menu. Why do I not have... So you can see here the app doesn't let you do everything. So I'm going to go ahead and close the app. And let's just disconnect here. Okay. Now if I come into the input menu, we actually have this menu item called track knob. And if we go in there, we have 2 different options. And this is extraordinarily unusual, the way they've implemented this. So this only applies to the F6 as far as I can tell. I've never seen it anywhere else. So let me just pull this up here. All right, so you have 2 different options. You have rec level. So what the knob is controlling is the record level of the individual isolated channel. All right, so even if you're not recording that left-right mix, this knob is controlling the record level of that individual channel number 1. So that's completely different than most mixers. That's the first thing. So when you move to this reference level, this is where things get really crazy. In reference level, the interesting thing is that once you start recording, if you're in reference level, let's go ahead and do that. Come back out. Once I start recording, this starts to work like a traditional fader. Notice how it's not changing the level on my individual channel, but it is changing the mix level. So when I pull that up, we're pushing the mix level. So that's operating now like a traditional fader. That's what reference level does. But when I stop recording, what reference level does is it actually works like it does in the other mode, where it actually is controlling the individual thing. And now as soon as I go into record again, you can see it's starting to work like a traditional fader. It's not adjusting the individual track record level, but it is affecting the overall mix. So just to give you a sense for what that's for. So that can be pretty confusing. I don't particularly care for that. It's kind of a weird way to implement things, but I usually leave it on record level. So hopefully that answers your question, number 2. All right, number 3, I can understand how 32-bit float allows the reconstruction of overmodulated audio by attenuating. The thing I can't grasp is why the sound floor doesn't rise when boosting very quiet audio. How does the process distinguish between noise that is sound floor and the noise one intended to record, albeit at a very quiet level? Well, I don't think it's making that distinction, first of all, but I think what it's doing is it's using all of the dynamic range of the analog stage preamplifier and then splitting that between 2 separate analog to digital converters. So I don't understand all of the details about that, but it's not making any sort of it's not distinguishing between noise that's sound floor and noise that's intended to be recorded. So it's not doing any magic from that standpoint. It's just creating an extraordinarily wide dynamic range where it's able to control that noise floor in a very effective way. So I don't know if that's really what you were looking for, or maybe as satisfying as you were hoping for. But this is one of those situations. I don't know if they have filed a patent in the United States that you can go read. I know Sound Devices has, and you can go read that one to see exactly what magic they're doing. But unfortunately, I don't know for the Zoom if they have a patent in the United States on that. Number 4, finally, when recording in regular 24-bit mode, would you think as a rough guide one would set trim at about, say, 55 dB for a dynamic mic and maybe 10 dB lower for a condenser? I know this depends on all kinds of other factors, but as a starting point? So yeah, I think 55 is not a horrible place. It's actually a pretty good place to start with most dynamic mics, and then of course you're going to have to fine tune it. And then for most condensers, I usually start somewhere around 40. Some don't need even that much. Some need a little bit more. So 40 is usually where I aim with condensers. And then finally, do you think Zoom should give us the option of being able to use the channel knobs as trim controls as well? That's this. I think some people would appreciate being able to work that way. And in essence, the way they've done it in 32-bit mode, it basically is like a trim. Technically, it's a record level fader. It's recording post fader, but it works like a trim. So you could do that. So I guess in some ways I would say they already have. So all you want to do is make sure when you're in input mode, in input menu, the track knob, make sure you're in this rec level setting, and basically that acts like a trim. I think that really, if I had to guess, the reason they did that is they were trying to make this device accessible to people that don't really, that are not used to traditional mixers. They wanted to make something that was just intuitive and easy to use. One knob controls your input level. And they weren't distinguishing between fader and trim. But then on the other hand, they are distinguishing between fader and trim because when you're not in 32-bit float mode, you do have a trim control within the menu. So I don't know. I can't really speak for why or what they did. I personally, this is a little bit mind-bending to me when I first used it. Once you understand it, I think it's very usable, but it is very different than traditional mixers. So, and then finally, if you're ever in touch with Zoom about the F6, do tell them that the Access app gives to blind people is fantastic and urge them to open up more of the menus in the app. A number of functions aren't currently possible from the app itself. I agree. I think it would be really nice if they would add, a little bit more. You saw we had to jump out of the app to go and change some of the other settings. So it's weird that they disable the things that aren't also enabled in the app, at least not directly. So anyway, it was kind of a funny setup, but yeah, I will definitely pass that along. So thanks, Gary. Great questions. All right, let's see here. John asks, I'm recording 48 kilohertz 24-bit to a mix pre 10 with limiters off. Why do signals begin clipping at -6 dB? Mix pre-LEDs start flashing red at minus 6 dB, as do the signal meters. Split files never exceed minus 6 dB. Is this simply a feature of the mix pre, or is there something to enable full dynamic range? Give me just a second. Let me set something up here. I'm going to see if we can show this to you. I did a test. Sorry, I had hoped to have this set up beforehand, and I thought I had everything, but this was one I missed. So we're going to get to it here. Here we go. Just pulling in a test file. Okay, let's show this to you. So I just recorded on the Mix Pre 3, and I was in 24-bit mode. And I turned the limiters off in the system menu and made this recording here. And you can see here it actually goes all the way to 0 dB. And just to confirm that I was in 24-bit mode, we pull it down, and there we go. So it's chopping it off. But yeah, that goes all the way to 0 dB. So I'm not sure exactly what happened in the particular case where you were working with it. So it looks like something was missed somehow, but it does look possible, like it's possible to use the entire dynamic range of the mixer. And if you turn those limiters off, you should be able to clip, meaning use every last dB available to you. So there's that. So if you're still having trouble with that, if I don't know how the details on what you had things set up as or how you had things set up. But if anyone else is aware of maybe other things that you could check on that. But I turned the limiters off, 24-bit mode, did the recording. We were able to use all of the dynamic range there. So, all right. Let's hop back into our questions. All right, there we go. Okay. Next up from Dick, I have a question. Are you intent to do a video about the Fairlight possibility in the A10 Mini on the software side to improve the audio quality of a live stream? I see now video about that part on YouTube. More focus on sound in live streams is, in my opinion, needed. Sound is 60% of the picture. Hope you can go more in depth on the different settings. I definitely will, Dick. In fact, I have the A10 Mini Pro should be arriving this week, and so I'll be doing a video on that, and we'll also be able to use we'll also be able to cover the Fairlight module within the ATEM Control app that allows you to tweak different things. It has a compressor, a limiter, I believe it has EQ. So those are a lot of the things that you'll generally need to work on there. So definitely coming, Dick. All right. Now, one of the things that we talked about earlier was the Deity Connect system. And there's Nick has been in touch with me over the last several months. He also owns the Deity Connect system. And one thing that he's done a lot of work on is kind of fine-tuning what the kind of optimal gain structure is on that system. And again, this all stemmed from the fact that when I first used it in the very first firmware, there was quite a bit of noise in this, like self-noise in the system, even when you're using different microphones. So it wasn't just the microphone contributing. In fact, it seemed like it was the wireless system itself that was contributing most of the noise floor. And he's done a bunch of tweaking over time as they've updated the firmware. And these are his most recent recommendations. So for those of you using the Deity Connect system, if you're interested, he suggests at this point that you start, as a starting point, set the receiver's output level at 0. And if you can, use the low latency mode. The higher latency mode generally, in his assessment at least, contributes some distortion to the overall signal. And then for the transmitter, start somewhere in the 18 to 24 dB of gain range. And then, of course, he likes to use the limiter, as do I. And he also adds a low cut or a high-pass filter from somewhere in the 80 to 90 hertz range. I usually go a little bit lower than that, and then if we need some more in post, we can add it. But in any case, those are some of Nick's recommendations in terms of getting the best quality sound out of the Deity Connect. So Nick, thanks for helping out with that. All right, we had a couple of non-audio questions. I thought we'd go ahead and put these at the end here. We have one from J.H. Brooks. Is there a way to get an NDI camera into the A10 Mini or Mini Pro? Is there additional hardware needed? Now, for those who are not familiar with NDI, NDI is a technology that allows you to send camera streams over a network, or you could even send them within the same computer. So for example, in Ecamm Live, which is my encoding app here that we're using for the live stream, if I also use Skype, I can send the feed, the video and audio feed from Skype via NDI within my computer over to the Ecamm app, and the Ecamm app can read it and display it and stream it. Likewise, you can put these NDI cameras out on an Ethernet network and stream the video from that camera into various other AV devices. And his question is, can I do that with the A10 Mini or the Mini Pro? And the answer is, natively you cannot. It does not have any sort of NDI support within the A10 Mini as far as I'm aware. And I did a little bit of research and I couldn't find any way to do it. So it does look like you're going to need some additional hardware. You're going to need an NDI decoder. And there are a variety of companies out there that make them. Bird Dog is one that makes them. So I would definitely check those out if you're interested there. Okay, next up from Chris. My local camera shop is selling out their old stock of Aperture 300D for 30% less than the 120D Mark II. Is there any reason I should spend more on the 120D too? I don't own any lights, so maybe it's not as smart to get these even if it's on sale. Well, I guess it kind of depends. The 300D, the original one was, it's good in a lot of ways, don't get me wrong, but the one thing that kind of bugged me about it, well, two things. Number one, the green balance was the green magenta balance was off a little bit on the originals, although I would assume that they've already, and they did they basically sent out to all the owners of the 300D a new lens to put on the front to do better at color correcting, so it was better balanced in terms of the green magenta balance. I would just make sure it's got that if you do buy it. And then if it does, then yeah, it's a pretty good light. It puts out a lot of light. The only thing I didn't like about it beyond that was that it is in three pieces. You have the light head, you have the controller box, which hangs on the stand, plus you have a floor, basically an AC adapter ballast type thing. And the AC adapter that sits on the floor has a very small, relatively high RPM fan that makes a horrible whining noise. So you're going to have to find a way to, put a sound blanket between that and the rest of the set. So that was the main thing I didn't like about it. Whereas the 120D2, there was no floor AC adapter. It was all built into the same unit that hangs from the stand, and there's no fan in it. So that's what I like a lot more about the 120D2. The 120D2 is enough light for most, certainly for interviews and things of that nature. You don't really need as much light output as a 300D unless you're lighting a big space. So those are some thoughts on that. Would it, if it's selling for 30% less than the 120D2, that's a pretty good deal. If you can find a way to deal with that fan in the AC adapter, and you confirm that it has that the color correction, the newer color correction lens on the front, then I think you'll be in good space. So it's probably worth it. So, all right, I think that is all of the questions that we have there for this week, and we have 10 minutes left. Thanks, everybody. Let's see what we've got in the comments here. All right, looks like we've had some good conversation. Thanks first of all, a couple of guys here. Thanks, Vincent, for the super chat, and also Rob. Very much appreciated. Thanks for getting the coffee fund started. Here's my contribution. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. All right. Just take a look here through the comments. We're sounding good. All right. So, Alejandro mentioned they do have to wear masks in Chicago as well. And then Thomas, yeah, mask plus glasses is not a good But cool masks. Yeah, it's tough. In fact, my wife was complaining about that. She went out shopping the other day with a mask, and she was wearing her sunglasses, and she said, I couldn't see. It kept fogging up my sunglasses. So unless you have a really nice tight seal around the nose and the cheeks, it's a little bit tricky there. And then likewise in Los Angeles, looks like they're been wearing them there for a while as well. And Trevor suggests that, yes, we should be wearing it. And I think it's just a good idea from the standpoint of, again, reminding you not to touch your face. I think I'm getting a little bit better at that. That's been a real challenge. And then also just to remind us to keep our distance there. All right. Peter Peter has the Lewitt 440. So let's see what we see, or what we sound. And then probably the only time you could get away with wearing a mask, walking into a bank and ask for money from my account. Yes. All right, Lorana Nation, I have a question. I use Audacity for noise reduction, and it seems to make the audio sound harsh. Any way to fix that? Yeah, the noise reduction in Audacity can be okay. It's not amazing, but it's pretty decent. But I think really you have to back off. And really, my thinking is that when you're using noise reduction like that, you have to really think of it as just to reduce the noise. Some people get to the point where they push it too hard. They want to get rid of all the noise. And really think of noise reduction, especially in Audacity, as a way to just reduce it somewhat, so it's a little bit less distracting. But what I typically do is I will push it and then undo and then pull it back a little bit and reapply it and listen. And I keep doing that and pulling back until I'm not getting any more artifacts. So that's one thing you can do. But I will say that the Audacity, is amazing as Audacity is, and it is amazing. A free app that does as much as that app does. And I believe it's 32-bit capable, which is pretty amazing as well. But the noise reduction in it is pretty good, but not top of the line. So that's the one thing, is just definitely kind of do that iterative process. Kind of go all in at first and then back it off until you're not hearing any artifacts anymore as well. So, all right. Jason says that the mic sounds nice and balanced. You'll notice here, I don't have it right at my mouth level. I have it more at my nose level. That is because my voice has quite a bit of sibilance in it. And if I come down, trying to do it gently here. She sells seashells by the seashore. And come back up. She sells seashells by the seashore. I think it helps with the sibilance by moving it up just a little bit. Just an interesting observation. All right. Thomas mentioned that the YouTube channel Gamers Nexus has the best technical video on RTX Voice. Thanks for that, Thomas. EPOS Fox has some good general info and some demos as well. And that is actually one that I linked to in the video. But thanks for the tip on the other one. There's another guy that is just super energetic. What is his name? Barnacles? Nerdgasm? He goes crazy. And in his video, if you can stand watching it, then I don't mean that from a bad to just so much energy. Like I felt exhausted when I was done watching it. He has a vacuum, leaf blower, and he's banging on the desk with a rubber mallet at the same time, testing it while he's still talking. And it did surprisingly well, given those circumstances. Rob also notes that Linus Tech Tips had a couple of entertaining demos as well, really showed how effective it is, even in ridiculously extreme. Yeah, he did, and also, can't remember the name of the guy I linked to, but I think he dialed Linus in. Anyway, so good stuff. Question, do you know of a good quick release plate to mount a camera on top of a Mix Pre that will allow the camera to come on and off the top easily? Manfrotto makes some. I don't know if anyone else has specifics out there. Definitely help out our friend here. But I know I use a lot of Manfrotto plates, so that's the one I would look at. And if you just do a search for Manfrotto quick release there are definitely some options out there. All right, Mark. LOL if at the end Curtis went, and I've actually been using a PC this entire time and then lifted an active leaf blower up from under the desk. I wish I could do that, Mark, but the reality is it's a Mac. I actually have two Macs running here tonight. One is the one that shows all of the questions and the agenda. And that actually feeds HDMI into the Mini Pro, A10 Mini Pro. And that leaves my main Mac here for all of the control of the Ecamm app. So that's what we've been doing lately. But that would be a lot of fun if I could do that. Maybe someday I will. I'll surprise you. I'm not going to tell anyone if I do go out and buy a PC and trick it out with an RTX card. Anyone know when the A10 Mini or A10 Mini Pro will be available again, Joe asks. Is the only difference between them the Ethernet streaming and monitoring options? There is the recording option as well, which is a pretty big deal for a lot of people. You can record to a USB, via USB to external drives. So that's a pretty big deal for a lot of people. You do have the multi-view monitoring output as well, as you alluded to, and you do have the Ethernet streaming, but the recording to hard drive or to external disk is one of the other big options out there. And I don't, my A10 Mini Pro has been shipped. I bought mine from DVE Store. They're based in Washington. I know that Kevin, Basic Filmmaker, just got his late last week. So he got his from B&H. So they're starting to ship now. And so you just what you need to do is get in line. So if you're committed to getting it, go ahead and buy it. You're going to have to put your money down, and then you get in line, and they send it out as soon as it becomes available. So definitely some things coming. And yes, we have a confirmation on that as well. Lau asks, a mic that can shoot both ways. In an old Danish action comedy, the hero had an automatic pistol that could shoot both ways. Of course, one of the bad guys accidentally shot himself with it. Yes. Yeah, there you go. Microphones are entering that same world now, too. Mike, good day from Melbourne. It's just after... Oh, I can turn off the picture-in-picture. Sorry about that. Just after midday Monday, so your timing is great. Question, what do you know about recording editing in an isolation orchestra? Editing must be a nightmare. Well, I've not done it yet. My wife is actually heads up what they call a fiddler's rally at the Scottish Festival here locally every year. And last year, of course, it was in person. This year, they can't do it in person, so she's been toying with the idea of doing an isolation orchestra where everyone records their part separately. So what we've talked about doing is putting together a click track or a metronome track and sending that out to all the participants, having them record, and then we'll bring it back and do the mix. And I have no idea what to expect. If they play in time, it'll be interesting how that edit goes or that mix goes, but that's all I know. If anyone else has information, it'd be great to know. Yeah, so Nicey Rig Manfrotto 501 plates. I think it's the 501 that I was thinking of. So one below, one above. It matches everything else I use on my cameras, but smaller plates would work. Yeah, and I think well, thanks for that, Mark. John says that the mic sounds articulate and not boomy or peaky. Room sounds good and controlled. Excellent. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. Trevor ordered his A10 Mini Pro from Adorama yesterday, but on the wait list. We'll see how long for delivery. Let's see here. I lost my place. Okay. Alvaro, video nerds, I need your advice. My church wants to live stream the service. Which camera to buy? Mevo, Solo Shot, Pixio? I'm not familiar with any of those. I don't know if those are NDI cameras. Maybe they are. And then Lloyd jumps in and says the A10 Mini Pro has inbuilt processing for the video stream to relieve the computer from that stress. Good luck getting one anytime soon, though. Yeah, the demand has been tremendous for these. Just about everyone wants to live stream now. Ditch Project, can you record 5 independent channels on the MixPre 3 by using the aux inputs on the left and right channels? No, you can record 4, is my understanding, on the MixPre 3. So you can get channels 1 and 2, plus from the auxiliary input you can get the left and right, so a total of 4 channels that way. but you cannot get 5. So when you use that auxiliary input, let's just pull that over here. When you use the auxiliary input automatically, and you set up one of the inputs to get audio from that, and in fact you can only get it from one side of it, I think, at a time. Yeah, so I'm only getting aux in 1 here, and if I want to get the stereo, I have to use another channel. So really, you're limited to, I think it's 3 ISOs plus a stereo mix is the max you can do. So 5 channels. Somebody correct me on that if I'm wrong, but that's my understanding or my recollection at this point. So unfortunately, no. You have to move up to the MixPre 6. The MixPre 6 will allow you to use all 4 XLR inputs or combo inputs plus the 3.5 millimeter. So you can record all, 6 inputs plus the stereo mix. So that one's a little bit more flexible on that front. Unfortunately, the MixPre 3 doesn't do that. All right, Dan is looking at the Soundcraft Signature 22 MTK mixer. My question about this board is, does it handle dynamic mics like an SM58 or Heil PR40? Well, I don't know. Depends on what the max gain is on that. So let's see if we can find out. Let's go to the Soundcraft. All right, and let's search for the board here, which is again the Signature 22 MTK. That's a pretty big board. Let's see if we can find the specs here. Oh, I could share my screen. Why don't I do that? I don't have it set up. No, this is another thing that didn't get set up in the reload today, but let me just find the specs here. See what it says. We have lexicon effects built in. That's pretty cool. Specifications. DBX limiters. Oh, that's nice. GB series audio routing with auxes, 22 inputs. Ultra low latency USB playback and recording. Sapphire British EQ. Let's see if there's any specifications. Just gives the size. It doesn't really say, I don't see it obviously here, I apologize, but what you're going to want to look for is the max input gain that it can supply. If it's in the 60 range, then yeah, you probably should be able to do those, certainly for live events. If it's in the 50 range, that's where things get a little dicey. So that's usually my kind of rule of thumb, but that's a good question, Dan. I would, you could probably even contact their Soundcraft support and they could tell you if you can't find it in the documentation there. I didn't see it obviously there, but all right. All right, we're just about over time here, or we are over time actually. Let's see one last question here. I often need to capture audio of around 20 people sitting in a circle, each one asking questions one at a time. Do you have any mic setup suggestions? Are you looking for one mic? Can they use a handheld mic? Can they pass it around? That's an option. Otherwise, if you have an omnidirectional in the middle, it's going to sound probably not very close because that, when you have 20 people sitting in a circle, that's going to be a pretty big circle. So they're going to sound a little farther away. And I don't know, I assume you're recording dialogue and not didgeridoo. But because you're talking about them asking questions one at a time. So those are my initial thoughts. Or if you have someone that could, if someone could have a boom and boom a mic out over the person that's currently asking a question, you could do that as well. So those are the first thoughts that come to my mind. If anyone else has other ideas, definitely throw those out there in the chat. We'd love to hear that. Oh, Jason also talked about a Soundcraft mixer. Used it at a nonprofit during lectures. It worked out very well. Connected to a Shure prosumer wireless system. Very nice mixer. Would be shocked if it didn't work well with an SM58. That makes sense to me as well. Matthew says, want to say thank you for the great information reviews. You've helped me throughout my career and continue to still help peeps like me in the loop with gear. Keep up the great work. Thanks so much, Matthew. I definitely appreciate that. All right, we're going to jump down here to the end. Make sure that we don't have any... yes, it's dialogue. Okay. Handheld is not a great option because it's very spontaneous conversation. Okay, yeah. You could set up an Omni of some sort in the middle. Or if you've got someone in the middle that could aim a shotgun, that might be better as well. So there's some thoughts on things you could do. All right, people. Thank you so much for all the questions. Thanks for your enthusiasm. Thanks for hanging in there with us through these. And hope everyone's out there staying healthy and wear your masks. We'll talk to you again next week. Take care, everybody.